Hello and welcome in this video explaining how my wireless redstone design work. As you can see on this time lapse, sped up twice, you can use it for a messaging system, for example. It is using sculk sensors to send wirelessly the redstone, and it is using binary to send the information through the sculk sensor line the fastest way possible. Now let's crack on to the explanation. This design has obviously two parts, a sender module and a receiver modules, which are connected through a sculk sensor line. The sculk sensor line send out binary information. They could be or on or off, so we can send a strength through them. But the idea is to have a signal strength that comes inside the sender module and that the same signal strength goes outside from the receiver module, allowing to have the same signal strength at large distances. Each of these modules have three parts. An encoder or decoder that is able to translate between strength and binary. A signal sender or signal receiver that are able to discuss together through a transporting method, so through the sensor line. And finally, a memory that is able to keep the useful information until the time we need it. I will do a video on each of these parts, explaining how they work and how to build them, but let's see just now the idea behind each of the elements and the difficulties you have to overcome in order to make them. Let's start with the signal encoder and decoder that are using binary. Well, first, what is binary? Well, binary is a way to write numbers using only zeros and ones. You could also say using current and no current. But how do we do that? Well, let's start trying to do that. 0 will obviously be 0. When we have 0, the lamp is off. 1, well, it will obviously be a light on. It will obviously be 1. Okay, but what about 2? Well, using lamps to write 2, using lamps, you can't only use one lamp, because with one lamp we can only have 0 and 1. So we'll use 2 lamps, okay? We'll use 2 lamps and we'll light the left one, because if we light the right one, it's like if we had only one lamp. Do you remember? The lamps represents a 0 or a 1. So we just light the left one, and so it gives us 10. Okay, great. So now 3. Well, 3 we can easily encode it with two lamps. So 2 lamps on, and it makes 3. What about 4? Well, 4, we need to add a new lamp. So let's add a new lamp. This lamp will be on and the old lamps will be off. And so on. And if you do that, well, you could ask yourself, well, if I want to write 10, I can't write it just 10, because if I write 10 in binary, it's 1, 0, it means 2, like we've saw before. So how would I write it? Well, the first way to find it is by continuing what we had going on. And if we continue, we would have light on, light off, light on, light off. So we would need 4 lamps, which will represent the number 1010, 1010. Okay. So now we have a way to write each number into zeros and 1. But now what if, let's take a random number using only zeros and 1, and let's try to find which number is it. So in binary, let's have 10011. Which number is it? Well, we could continue the list we had going on and continue until we find out which number it is. But this would be quite long on numbers like 100, 1000. There's a way easier way to do that. And so to do this, at each place, at each digit, we will assign a value. So the first one on the right will be 1. We'll have the value 1. The second one will have the value 2. The third one the value 4. The fifth one the value 8. And the last one the value 16. And actually, each time you add a digit, each time you add a lamp, this lamp has double the value of the precedent one. See, I went from 2 to 4 by multiplying by 2, 4 to 8 by multiplying by 2, and so on. And if we apply these values, then the number we have here is 16 plus 2 plus 1. It makes 19. Okay, easy, simple. Well, easy once we've understand the technique. And if you watch all the numbers we had before, actually this technique can apply to them. See, if we have 4, if we have 10, it works. Great! And so we have a way to transform binary into numbers and a way to transform numbers into binary. Oh, wait. What if we want to transform 63 into binary? Well, we'll have to list all the numbers from 1 until 63 to get this binary number. Isn't there a faster way? A more efficient way? Well, of course there is. To do that, we take every value of the digits, the binary digits. We take each of them their value and we try to subtract them from the bigger to the smallest to the number we want to encode. So for example, let's take 10. 10, can we subtract 8? Yes, of course. So the first digit from the left will be 1 or will be a lamp on. So 10 minus 8 makes 2. Okay, 2, can we subtract 4? No, we can't. It will become a negative number otherwise. And here we work with positive ones. So 0. 2, can we subtract 2? Yes, we can subtract 2. We get 0. Well, 2 minus 2 equals 0. So the lamp is on and we have 0. Oh, yeah. And now 0 minus 1, can we do it? No. So the result is 0. Well, the lamp is off and the last digit is 0. And so we've successfully encoded 10. These are the methods I used in my encoder and in my decoder inside the design I've created. So now let's crack on to the memory. The idea of the memory is to have 4 redstone lines and to remember the values of those redstone lines. So for example, here I have the 4 memory cells without any information in them. And now then I've activated the memory cells and I have a value in each memory cell. Oh, wait. Do you see the problem here? The arrows and the lines represent redstone lines, so it could only be activated or deactivated. And when we watch the first photo and the second photo, you can see that it has 3 states. Lit, not lit, and no information. And how do we do the difference between no information and unlit? Well, you then need a 5th line, a control line. This control line will say whether the memory needs to remember what is here or not. You can imagine that the 4 first line, you can set their values with levers, and then that the control line, you press a button to activate it. So it means that you choose the value you want while you're changing the levers. You don't affect the memory. And whenever you press on the button, you say, okay, this is what I want, memorize it. And so the memory will remember this setup. Now that we have this control sequence, we need to have a way to clean the memory, to say, okay, I had the time to use what you have in memory. Now I want you to clean yourself and accept new values. Because while the control is on, you can't input any new value into the memory. So to do this, we'll add a new line that I've named the OK next. And this line will reset the control sequence so that the control line, so that all 4 values are emptied. A good thing is that this setup stacks itself quite nicely. See, just by putting the OK next of a cell as the inverse of the control sequence of the next cell, you create easily a memory. So for example, let's press the button, let's remember something in the memory. And so whenever the first cell receives a value, well, its OK next is already activated, so it will forget what it has. Same for the second, it will receive, but since the OK next is activated, it will forget it. And the third one, the same. But the fourth one, its OK next is not activated, because this OK next, we will activate it manually each time that we need to have the next element in the memory. And so we have this setup where there's only the last memory cell that remembers what was the values that we wanted to remember. And so at this moment, we can put whatever other value. If we don't press on the button to activate the control line, we won't have anything else in memory, and we will memorize what we already have. So then, if we change the value and press the button once, twice, thrice, well then, we'll have new elements in the memory. Once it is full, it cannot accept anything else as input. And now, if we just press the OK next of the last cell, the last cell will forget what it had. So the third cell will give him his information. Since the last cell's control line deactivated, the OK next of the third one activated, and so it will forget what it had and take what the second cell had. Then the second will forget, and the first one will give him. And then the first one will forget, and we'll have this setup where we simply forgot the first element that came in. Okay, nice. So we have a working design. The only thing with this design is that the control line is quite hard to implement at first. It's easy to build it once you have created, but it's hard to design. On the other hand, the first thing we saw, the encoder and decoder, are once you have the idea, they are quite easy to create. They are quite easy to build and to design. Now let's crack on to a hard part to design and the hardest part to build, the transmission system. So on the left side we have the sender. On the right side we have the receiver. We have the two sculk sensors lines. We could also just put one. The theory would be the same. I've just chosen to put two. I'll explain you later on why I've chosen to put two. And so here, the first issue that we have, the first thing we have to tackle, is the fact that we have 4 in input, 4 in output, but only 2 in the middle. And so we need to first send the 2 first information we have to send, and then send the 2 next. So first send the blue and the brown, and then the orange and the green. But when you think about it, before sending anything, there is nothing sent. So that means that, or when there's nothing sent, the receiver thinks that he receives 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, or the receiver is shut down and waits to receive something. That means that if we just send the 2 first pulses and the 2 second pulses, we can have situations where we're unsynchronized, like this situation. We try to send a 3, but what we receive is a 12, because the receiver will wake up only when he will receive the 1-1. So we need, before sending our free, to send a synchronizing pulse. So this pulse, I've decided to do two pulses at the same time. I've chosen so because the sculk sensors are quite sensible to any vibration around them, and it's harder to have the two sculk sensors activated at the same time than activated at 2 times different, activated, for example, at 1 tick of difference. So to have the sender and the receiver synchronized, I need to send a signal on both exactly at the same time. And then once my sculk sensors are able to listen again, I'll send the 2 first pulses, and then I'll send the 2 next pulses. And this would allow me to send pulses like the 3 that I've tried to send. Let's do the sender module. Since we need to send first the blue and the brown, and then the orange and the green, then on the top sculk sensor line we need to put the blue and the orange, and on the bottom sculk sensor line we need to put the brown and the green lines. And so we have this first setup that links everything together. But, small issue, we need to first allow the blue and the brown, and then allow the orange and the green. So we need to control which one will be able to send. So for this, we'll use a clock which has a control, which outputs a control line. And this control line will be on one state, and then on another state, and then on the first state, and then on another state. And on each state, it allows or the blue and orange, or the brown and green. To activate and deactivate the clock, we simply take the control line from the memory, because the control line will be on whenever there's something to send, and will be off whenever there's nothing to send. So if the control line of the memory is on, we activate the clock, and whenever it gets off, we deactivate the clock. And then we need to remember that we have a sync signal before everything. So from this clock, we have the sync. And from the clock, we need to output an OK next to the memory, because whenever we have sent this pulse, we need the next pulse. Nice! So now we have our sender system. We now need to make the receiver part on the other side. So first, let's just flip the system. Okay, now there's some things to tweak out. Can you see which ones? Well, first, the entire interaction with the memory on the right side is not the same. We don't need any OK next, so we can take this out. And the thing that comes out from the clock is not an activate and deactivate signal. It will be more like the memory control, the button you press to say, this is what I want to memorize. But we need also to remember what were the 2 first signals we received. So in order to do that, I've added some small memories on the control line from the clock. These memories are not like the memory cells that we have in our memory part. These small memories will just remember whenever they receive a signal, what is it, and they just need a way to reset themselves, that whether they were at state 0 or at state 1, they could reset them at state 0. When do we start and when do we stop our clock? Well, obviously, we start the clock whenever we receive the sync signal. Because when we weren't receiving anything and we start receiving 2 pulses at the same time, sorry, it means that it's the sync signal and we need to start recording what is being sent. But when do we stop? Well, it depends on how do we implemented the sync on the sender. So let's go back on the sender. The first case, which is I find the easier one to make, is a sync on every message. So every time we send something, we send a sync before sending them. This allows us to send a zero, because if I send a sync and then nothing, it means that I've sent a zero. And so in this case, on the receiver side, well, we don't need to change anything. All we need to do is to change the clock into a timer. So whenever we receive a sync, we need to put the control in a certain position and wait to the second signal to come in, the one just after the sync. We remember it, change the control line, wait for the next signal. Whenever we have it, we stop everything, we send a signal through the activate line, and we reset, waiting for next sync signal. The second case is that we say, well, we know that there's nothing that is being sent when we receive nothing. So when there's only zeros that are being sent, because zero is nothing, nothing. So that means that the sculk sensor line is not activated and not activated. So this allows us to use the synchronization line only once. So this case 2 is only one synchronization. We send a synchronization whenever we start sending, and then we send everything without ever sending another sync message. The good thing about this system is that you send less signals for each message. But the con of this method is that we can't send any zero. Whenever we try sending a zero, the receiver side don't see anything come in, so they'll say, well, we received nothing, so we stop receiving. Okay, so now that we know how exactly we will send our information, how will we receive it? Well, whenever we receive nothing, whenever we receive 2 times zeros, so whenever we receive a zero, we need to stop. When do we know we have received a zero? When we know it whenever the 4 lines are 0. So we need a stop signal that comes from the 4 lines and goes and feeds into the clock. And so, with this system, whenever we receive a 0, we stop the clock, and that's done. So that's why we can't send any 0, because we'll stop the clock. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that your mind did not blow in the middle of it. If you want to know how I've built them, well, just subscribe and ring the bell so that you don't miss out my next videos, because as I said at the start of the video, I will make a tutorial on each of them. I will explain how they work, and I will explain how to build them. And if you like this, check out my showcase video about this design so that you see more practically how it works, because this was very theoretical. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and this was Nayo. See you later.